course, that music can mean only one thing. It's Let Me Explain with Chris Vecchio. Chris, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well this morning, gentlemen. And I have to say, I'm in a pretty excited mood about what's happening in some corners of the market here today.
Okay. What are you excited about?
Well, I think we should start with some of the stories that are coming out from across the Pacific, because I think it may be perhaps the most important narrative boom that we've seen in several months and could even eclipse what's happening with AI. So let me tell a little bit of a story here. First off, I'm no expert in physics. I took the AP physics exam in high school. I got a 3 on it. You know, they ask a question about a penguin skating across the ice, and naturally I just draw a picture of the penguin. I have no idea what I'm doing here, but I do have a lot of experts in my family. My grandpa was an engineer, 2 of my uncles are engineers, several of my cousins are engineers, and they work with applied materials. And so there's been this story going around recently about this new material called LK99, which is a lead, it's a lead composite, I guess, technically speaking. It has some copper in it as well, but it's basically a step towards building and figuring out a room temperature superconductor. Now, why does that matter? Well, when you have a semiconductor, it's transferring electricity, it's transferring heat ultimately, and over time it loses its capacity to hold a charge. That's why when you say are looking at your iPhone while scrolling through the Twitter or X app and you're playing something on YouTube, your phone starts to heat up. There's this transfer of energy. A room temperature superconductor would mean that there's effectively no loss of energy, no transference of heat, and an unlimited energy loop. Now that sounds too good to be true. It's something out of science fiction. But these Korean scientists have announced, perhaps surreptitiously, the discovery of this material called LK99, which allows for superconductivity. And scientists around the world right now are racing to figure out how to replicate the process. In fact, some scientists here in the United States announced yesterday that they've been able to replicate the process, and these papers are now starting to make their way around the internet. I find this to be really fascinating because today, AMSC, American Superconductor, their stock is trading up by 50% or so. And every news organization I look at that's talking about this stock move says it's happening on no news. There's been no filing with the SEC. It's all due to higher trading volumes. This is perhaps the most important thing that's happening right now in the market that really no one's talking about. This is potentially a major technological breakthrough. This means MRI machines that would be 1/100th of the cost that they are now. This means maglev trains. This means effectively unlimited sources of energy to accomplish an innumerable amount of things right now. And so if we thought the AI boom was big, there is now a new narrative that's just starting to blossom in this market that could legitimately carry things higher. We've seen in the world of AI in recent months, lots of stories, lots of beliefs that this is going to bring about the next big productivity boom for the economy. What's happening out of South Korea right now could be perhaps the most important, dare I say, technological advancement in our lifetimes thus far. And so when we're talking about semiconductor stocks, when we're talking about any of these tech stocks moving forward, I would encourage people to pay attention to LK99. And I only point this out because we know that the market loves a really good narrative right now. It loves the idea that there's something out there that can propel economic growth forward, even if the Fed has rates high, even if the housing market's still really messed up, even if used car prices are doing whatever they're doing. I say I'm excited about this because the people that I've talked to think this is almost too good to be true, because it would turn our fundamental understanding of physics and how we operate in the universe on its head. And so right now, if only to explain what's happening in some of these stocks, there appears to be a legitimate thrust that we may be looking at what's akin to another move in the second half of the chessboard. And to expand upon that a little bit more, Eric Brynjolfsson, a Stanford research professor, he's also on the National Bureau of Economic Research. He wrote this book several years ago called The Second Machine Age. And he introduced this chess term, which was actually really integrated into this world of technology by Ray Kurzweil, the futurist, that as we move down the technological tree, as we advance through time, there's only so many more things we can do. Like in a game of chess, the initial development stages take a long time because there are so many different options out there. But once you get down to those final few pieces, the game begins to speed up. Between AI, superconductivity, the advances that we've seen in fusion in recent weeks, I think there's a really potent narrative right now that's forming that suggests we could be looking at a market that's akin to the late 90s kind of tech boom stock market bubble, because investors love narratives, and who doesn't love a good story that the economy is about to change for the better forever moving forward. So I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but for people who are trading semiconductors or any of these technology companies, I would encourage you to go check out what's happening with LK99. There's a lot of haziness around it still, but results are being replicated, and it could mean that we have a very, very strong narrative that carries our way through the markets for the rest of this year and perhaps beyond.
So a buddy of mine who I respect sent me an article on this guy. I'd never heard of it, and he just sent it to me yesterday or the day before, and I just finished reading it yesterday. And it is, from what they say, and it's only one or two articles after the one article, I looked at a bunch of others, and there was a lot of skepticism, as you said. But they're talking about it like it is, I know nothing on the space, obviously, but they're talking about like it's the Holy Grail, not just here, but worldwide. Like it could be, it's what they've always wanted to achieve. It would almost be like like gas from water, like anything that was readily available, that kind of Holy Grail thing. So it's a great topic. I don't know anything about it. I don't know what I can add to the subject, but I can say that if you search it, there are a lot of articles on it. Go ahead.
Well, from someone that has learned a lot about physics from the Big Bang Theory, that's been my show? Yes, that's been my primary source of, of my training
information
in physics. It's the best I can do, under the circumstances. So I consider myself to be a moderate, low-level expert. I think that, although interesting, I think you both are a little bit jumping off the, you're getting way out in front of this train. This company, AMSC, okay, I'm not sure that they've ever actually built anything. They have a market cap that prior to today was about
$100 million,
$300 million. They're basically just post-funding. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a $300 million company. We're talking about, NVIDIA. Let's put things into reality. When we talk about semiconductors, and you talk about, a space that is multi-trillion-dollar space, with the biggest companies being trillion-dollar companies, and this company is essentially, they have more money in their pop machines, in their vending machines on the first floor than this company is worth. I wouldn't read too much into it. People love a great narrative. They love a great story. I hope there's something here, because it does sound like fun, but I am, I'm not putting AMSC or whatever it is in the Hall of Fame after one outing where,
of course.
No, but what about these companies that have $1
innings.
trillion that can put some research and can develop something on this?
Obviously, that's interesting.
Sure.
And maybe that's already priced into these companies that are worth $1 trillion. Listen, I'm not saying, I think it's an interesting topic, and I'm glad that Chris brought it up, because I think this one stock is probably, something.
This one's probably a flash in the pan.
Yeah, probably
knows?
is.
Sure.
And everything else, I'm guessing prices kind of built into it and that kind of stuff. But, there's a lot of juice, Chris. There's probably $1 trillion in juice in this space already. So the question is, how much upside have they already priced in? I don't think the story is that fundamental. I think the story is more price-wise. I think you can buy semiconductor stocks if they drop by 20 or 30%. So all of a sudden they get more attractive based on implied volatility and based on price. I think right now, man, it's a scary space, for me at least.
Yeah, this isn't a recommendation to go out there and buy AMSC hand over fist. And quite frankly, I don't know who the winners or losers in this space are going to be. This is something
you're just
that's really
you're raising a topic. It's fine.
Right, and I think it's important because we've seen the meme stock craze, right? When markets get a hold of the narrative, and meme stock could be something like AMC or GME, or it could be memeing in the sense that it's an AI related company, and as long as they say they're AI related, they're going to do well. We saw this with Kroger, the grocery store chain, a few months back. They mentioned on an investor call how they were integrating AI to help with more sound decision making for inventory management. But this is the kind of thing that once the market gets a hold of it, it's very possible that it becomes that new meme that carries stocks higher even if there's no tangible proof yet, even if there's no reasonable evidence to suggest there's widespread application just yet. It's something that's kind of just leaking out of the world of physics into broader markets. We see this big move happening here today for the first time. I wouldn't dismiss this right now. It's very difficult to predict what will happen next, of course, and that's quite frankly not our job. But in terms of narrative, the market may have just received the new narrative that could ultimately propel tech stocks higher these next few months. So everyone's saying this market's overdone. A new narrative changes that equation dramatically.
I mean, 200% volatility, 17, 18 million shares trading in the first, 30 minutes. Clearly, it's got
markets at 30 cents wide, but
it's got meme stock potential.
It does.
I mean, what is a meme stock? It's got crazy high volume, high volatility, high visibility, high virality. That's a meme stock. And so, have there been meme stocks for the last 50 years? Of course.
Sure.
They've only been called meme stocks for the last 2 years. But we've always had meme stocks. I mean, another aspect of meme stocks is probably high short interest. I have no idea what the short interest is in this stock. Maybe it doesn't even exist. But regardless, sure, it's an interesting story. What else you got?
Well, it's the beginning of the month, so I figured we could talk a little bit about these market tendencies. Obviously, July, June, July, August are the best 3 months of the year for stocks, and we're coming to the tail end of that window. August has typically produced pretty solid gains in the neighborhood of around 2% for both the S&P and the NASDAQ. But when I was running the seasonal studies, and granted, they are now statistically viable again, when we go through the beginning part of the year, February, March, April, May, and June have been just total garbage because of what happened around COVID and Russia's war in Ukraine. You can't really take them at face value. And I say that because statistically speaking, when the standard deviation of the data set is greater than the average, it effectively means that it's random. You can't pull any information out of that. But once we get through July, we start to see that the seasonal studies become more valid. The standard deviation of the moves no longer eclipse the averages of the data sets. And that's the case here in August. I want to point out what's happening with VIX. August has produced the biggest rise in the VIX of any single month over the past 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years. In fact, the window from the start of August through the second week of October has been the time when volatility rises the most in these markets. Now, we've talked about complacency here. On Sunday night, we were joking, what a better sign of complacency and a market potentially reaching a near-term extreme in sentiment than prominent bears capitulating. In fact, Mike Wilson, the Morgan Stanley chief equity strategist who capitulated on his bear stance last week, came out yesterday and said, well, this is like a 2019 market where the stocks can just continue to grind up and up and up. Capitulation to conversion in the span of a week, that to me is a signal that we are reaching a potential exhaustion point here.
Really?
And so I would
to me, it's a
caution
signal. To me, it's a signal that you work at Morgan Stanley.
Well, maybe.
I think you're giving him way more credit than he deserves. To me, it's a signal that you're.
Well, it's not about him. It's not about him. It's about when prominent bears who have been correct for a long while, then throw in the towel and then flip to the other side of the trade. That to me is a warning sign, right? It's a sign of sentiment exhaustion. And so when I think about the capitulation in the markets that's going on right now, and I see that we're going into a window where volatility really could rise, and I look at the upcoming inflation data where we are going to see higher inflation prints, it does cater to a belief that this may be a good time for a pause here. And so people who have been operating on strategies that are predicated around volatility staying low, it may be time to think about what are the tools do I have in my toolkit here? So in the event that vol starts to change its behavior and falls more in line with seasonal patterns, how can I be prepared to adjust my strategy? You never want to get caught flat-footed in the midst of a financial regime shift, because that's how you lose money.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you think that you're hitting nails when really they're screws, and you still have a hammer in your hand. It's always good to make sure that the screwdriver's in reach.
There's a simple answer to that question, and the tasty approach in there and the mechanics is that is the entire reason why we stay small, and that's the entire reason why we ramp up our capital usage into higher volatility. So we have a whole model that basically says as volatility contracts, you contract your capital usage. As volatility expands, you expand your capital usage. And in the process, you stay small trade size. So what you're doing is just ramping up the number of trades you make as volatility goes higher. It's it's the most logical approach to just basically being mechanical about what you just described.
And you've
Hey,
got
it fits with
and you have
Go ahead,
volatility.
sorry.
To your point for August, you got volatility at all-time lows, recent all-time lows. I mean, it's a perfect scenario for volatility to expand. So, I would look to see August be higher than July too for volatility for sure. Hopefully.
Hopefully. It's the Warren Buffett expression, right? When there's blood in the street, buy stocks. And that's a morbid analogy, but it's when people are panicking, the fear in the market's going up, that's when it pays to be a little bit more aggressive and go out there and try to capitalize on the situation. When other people are losing their minds, it pays to have a cool head. And right now, this complacency that's in the market, I think it's actually going to unlock more interesting opportunities. Tom, you pointed out that volumes across commodities trading has been falling across the board, not just at Tasty, but everywhere, and that makes sense. When stocks are going up, why would you want to diversify into other asset classes? Just ride the ball. But crude oil, copper, silver, all these growth-related names, they're starting to perk up in a very meaningful manner, technically speaking. And what would scare markets more than all of a sudden, oh no, commodity prices are rising once more. We have to reprice in our expectations for what central banks are going to do. We've been wrong about the end of higher interest rates. Higher for longer is back on the table. Fed's not cutting rates by March next year, which to me always seems silly given the statements that Powell and co have been making. There's a nice little mix for some more excitement here in this month of August. And the narrative boom could help contribute to that, right? If the markets are running away because of all of a sudden we see this new technological development that, as Tony said, could be the holy grail of physics of our lifetime, well, then we have this perfect storm for markets to be very, very jumpy. And high volatility may not mean downside in stocks necessarily. It may mean that we begin to see a pricing of, again, a new economic and financial regime that was not even really considered until this past weekend.
Good stuff, Mr. Vecchio. I enjoyed that.
Thank you, Chris.
Good
Appreciate your time, man. We're going to take a quick 90-second break and come back. We got more Tasty Live with a market measure next. Back in 90 seconds.